to Archaeopolitics, a Harry Potter reread podcast focusing on politics in the wizarding world. As always, I'm Adri, one of your hosts, and a recurring English major.
And I am Helene, your co-host and producer.
And today, we'll be talking about Chapter 11, titled The Bribe of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. But before we get to Chapter 11, Helene, how are you?
I'm all right. Lots of stuff going on. Just, trying to get to October, really. Crazy life. What about you, Mama?
Well, in baby news, I'm pretty sure Olivia is teething, which is fun for the entire family.
Of course.
But following up on recommendation of yours from last episode, I downloaded Dreamlight Valley, and it is now the game that I play when I'm pumping milk because
amazing.
I have been running out of things to watch on Netflix and Prime and all my related subscription services. So I need something to do while, I do my cow duties,
Yeah, I feel that because I just recently finished Golden Girls, so I've been trying to decide what my next step will be. But yes, I've been playing lots and lots of Dreamlight Valley. I'm basically obsessed with it. It's very fun. I thoroughly enjoy it. There are definitely
questions for you.
Yeah.
Question for you. So, when you play these simulation games, right? Do you play under your own your same name and a character that looks like you, or do you invent a new persona? I was wondering about this today.
Yeah, I always just I do someone that looks like me and my name. Well, I tend to do an idealized version of myself. I tend to make myself look like myself, but quote unquote prettier. When you're doing The Sims and you're like, I'm gonna have just the perfect outfit and the perfect makeup and the perfect shape. I don't like my face shape, so I'm gonna make it a little bit like a heart shaped or something.
Casting your Hollywood biopic.
Exactly, but I still like to make it mostly myself with my hair color and my eye color and keep the basics. What about you?
So the first few times, if I'm doing The Sims, for instance, right? I'll do the first few times I'll do someone like me with my name, with my, face shape, all the things. Like you said, idealized version, because come on, at The Sims, we're not going to be and it's pandemic chic over here. But if I, start another new game a couple of times, then it'll be I'll create a character. So in Dreamlight Valley, of course, it's the first time I play it, so it's just me. It's not nothing fancy, but
yeah,
I try to make it as much as me as the as the game would allow it.
Yeah,
I think it was Red Dead Redemption 2 that because Seth is you're so good at making these avatars look like people, right? People like him or me or whatever. He's I want you to make mine, and I made one that was so good. He still has it up. It was on his Instagram. It was basically him in longer hair.
Ooh,
and he was
funny.
This is very impressive. But it was because also Red Dead Redemption had a better builder of
I've
spaces,
been,
right?
Considering whether or not I want to play that. I saw that it was on sale recently, and I was I've heard good things, but also I'm not a cowboy person, so I was will this be worth it?
I don't think you might. I don't know. I didn't feel like I needed to play it. You know what I mean? I was even though it's a simulation, doesn't seem like my thing.
That makes
sense. But he is a big cowboy, so
that's true. He is a Texan,
He's very much a Texan, and he went to school in New Mexico, so it was very
that
cowboy chic, Southwestern, if you will. So yeah, he likes that, but I really enjoy the building process of making someone an avatar look like a person. That software was really good at that. That took me about an hour though.
Yeah, you get into it. You're a perfectionist.
Well, I also like the Sims software is like the second best I've seen.
Yeah, I love The Sims. Did you see? I saw. Speaking of news, if we this can be our mini Potter Watch section, but I saw that The Sims game, like the base game without any expansions or game packs or whatever, is gonna be free for everyone to play on like October 18th. I think they're gonna start moving that over. Like I think they're gonna move it over to like a kind of like a Fortnite thing where the game is free, but like if you want extra stuff, you pay.
That's really awesome.
I really like that idea, honestly, that they're moving to that model because The Sims is just a really fun game that I think should be accessible to more people. Because I don't know, it's a good game for people to play.
And it has so many wild expansion packs. Like there's like a
Yeah.
sorcerer one. There's like Hollywood. There's
Yep. I have all
kinds
of
of
those.
expansion packs.
Yes,
I'm
I have
seeing the ones I have.
yeah. Yeah, I have like Realm of Magic and Get to Work and
Yes.
like the famous one. I can't remember what it's like. Get
Yeah,
Famous or something.
I also have the one that's like farmer-ish, like a cottage living or whatever.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Seasons, cats and dogs.
obviously pets. Obviously pets.
Vacations. I think I got the vacation pack kind of more recently where you can like plan a vacation for your Sims and like take them like to Mexico or like on a beach or whatever. It's so cute.
Oh, that's cute. Yeah, no, my Sims are work, 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 and no play.
Yeah, I really like the work expansion pack because you can like choose like you can be like a police officer and like go on like beats and find people to arrest and then bring them back to the station and like interrogate them and get them to confess. It's like a whole thing. It's so fun.
Yeah, no. I will say the experience of giving birth on The Sims did not mirror my experience of giving birth, so
That's fair. That is probably an accurate assessment.
I feel like the experience of giving birth in The Sims is like maybe what giving birth will be in 50 years, which is like teleporting the baby out of your uterus.
Can we get those medical advances sooner rather than later? Thanks.
Like, now, please, thank y'all. Not that I'm getting pregnant ever again, but I'd like that for someone else.
Yeah, I love that for other people.
Yeah. Look at me, so altruistic. Aren't I the best?
You're definitely modest.
Very modest. My God. Like, if I was any more modest, you wouldn't hear from me. Anyway. So, any exciting news, or are we ready to go?
I think that we can get right into this chapter. We talked off mic, but this one's a doozy, so might want to give it some space to discuss.
I wanted to like give us some levity before we went like deep and dark, you know?
Yeah. We'll bring the levity back at the end, I'm sure.
I hope so.
Well, in case you guys
in this chapter.
Yes, in case you guys forgot, this is the one where after waiting for 3 days for Creature to return to 12 Grimmauld Place with Mundungus, as they instructed him to go get, the trio get an unexpected visitor when Lupin decides to stop by. He provides much-needed updates on the outside world and the events that transpired since the wedding was raided by the Death Eaters, as well as an offer to abandon his wife and unborn child in order to accompany the trio on their quest, which Harry was not so happy about. After his departure, Creature and Mundungus do finally show up, and the trio finds out that none other than the wonderful, beautiful, amazing, oozing sarcasm, Dolores Umbridge is in possession of the locket.
Dolores Umbridge, the best person we know.
Yeah, gotta love her.
Well, Helene, when we read this chapter separately,
yes. We don't read it together.
Sadly, no, not yet. We were like, this one's a bummer of a chapter. How amazing that we get to talk about it.
Yeah, this is what this podcast is here for, though, right?
Yeah,
That's
no,
what
of
this
course.
podcast is here for. Like I read this when I was reading this chapter, I was like, okay, this chapter is like what this podcast is made for. Like
Correct.
these types of
Correct.
topics and discussions. Yeah.
Um, and after reading it separately, we came up with our own politics, and I came up with my politic, and then I saw yours, and I was like, okay, let me go with my politic first because mine is super
Yes.
broad,
Yeah. I
and
thought
yours is a subset of mine, so that works out wonderfully.
yes, I was gonna say that would also cross my mind that we should start with yours. So please.
There we go. So hey, we're here. We got it. We're figuring this podcasting thing out, Helene. After how many years? So
Yeah,
many years.
Seventh season, we're finally nailing it.
Finally. And the listeners are like, now you're getting it? Okay, great. Doesn't sound like it, first of all. Second of all, it has been 5 literal years. Anyway, my politic is the politics of persecution, because this chapter really reminded me of, obviously historical events that have happened, which is one of your politics, part of your politic. But it also made me think of how the politics of persecution has been used by the conservatives. The conservatives. Oh my God.
Having
Do I
trouble?
not know how to speak?
Conservatives.
The GOP. Okay,
There we go.
let's call
Yeah,
it what it is.
that's easier. That's easier to say.
Okay, so when I went to finding like literature for the politics of persecution, I found that there's an actual like book written about it that's all about religious people, evangelicals, Christians, right? Talking about how they feel persecuted for their religion. And this, of course, is the invented idea in their heads that people are persecuting them for being Christian.
Okay.
I'm not saying they are correct. I am saying
I know
that's
you're
what they're
not.
thinking, and they're arguing. Yep. Listeners, I know this is an audio medium, but Helene's face is priceless right now. So one of the things, and this was actually a book that came out of, I believe, Baylor University in like 2004. So this was like the Bush era type conservative Christians. And then it has resurfaced now with Trump's FBI raid, which is not a raid, it's an execution of a search warrant on Mar-a-Lago. And the Trumpists, MAGA fans, are using this as a basis of saying he's being persecuted for his religious beliefs. And they're like implementing like this doctrine of persecution. And actually, this is not new to me because I've followed like evangelical Christianism pretty closely, not because I am evangelical, but because it fucking scares the living daylights out of me. And I like to, know thine enemy. And this idea of like, oh, you can't say Merry Christmas anymore. This is a persecution of our, freedoms or
Christmas.
whatever.
War on Christmas. Yeah.
That's part of that idea of Christian persecution, right? Never mind that they want to shove their ideals down our throats every day, which is actual persecution, but I digress. So Elizabeth Castelli calls the Christian persecution complex to what I just described, and she says there is no precise origin point for the complex. Through political activism organized under the sign of religious persecution and religious freedom, has certainly grown substantially in the last decade, and most pressingly in the post-September 9/11 September 11th context. So she wrote this back in 2007. And then Castelli told the writer of this op-ed that came out now in 2022 on Wednesday that the presidential elections of Barack Obama on one side and Trump on the other have amplified the complex, instilling in conservatives even greater feelings of loss and being under siege. In fact, reports like the one from Reuters on Tuesday claim that the search of Trump's home may actually have boosted him, placing him in his political sweet spot, allowing him to play a victim of institutional forces, and that is in quotes, the deep state, at a time when his grip on the party appeared to be slipping. So, these politics of persecution that I'm talking about in the chapter is when, we see like the new ministry wanting to register Muggle-borns, when Lupin is kind of feeling persecuted his entire life, but even more so now that, the ministry has fallen. Mundungus is basically like the Trump-like figure of he's not really being persecuted, but he certainly thinks he is, and he's the one screaming the loudest, if you notice. Harry is being persecuted, but he's being relatively calm about it all. So like the people who are actually being persecuted and like Hermione, who is an actual Muggle-born, is relatively calm, and like Mundungus, who is not being persecuted whatsoever, really, is the one like making himself the biggest victim of them all. So that's it. That's how I was looking at my politic.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Yeah. I mean, first of all, you want to talk about religious persecution? I know this. You weren't saying this personally, but like the like text you found was saying this or whatever. Religious persecution.
It's okay. We know. I wanted to be very clear.
Yeah.
I personally do not believe this.
Yeah. No,
but I have heard even people like not super close to me, because obviously I would have cut them out of my life. But people I have worked in offices with being like, this is why this country's going backwards, because they took God out of schools. And I'm like, God has nothing to do with schools, assholes. Separation of church and state. Like,
yeah, I want to preface anything I say with I know that there have been instances where Christians have historically been persecuted for their religion. It's very rare. I'm not saying it never happened, though. I'm just saying that it is not.
Okay, I think okay, so let's talk about like religious persecution. I believe that any and all religions have at some point been persecuted for their beliefs, because it's such a personal thing to each individual. And if there are more than one religions in wherever you live, then one group is going to be possibly rubbing off against the other in like tensions, right? If there's a lot of dissonance between their belief systems.
Yeah. And America was actually founded on the idea of so many people who were fleeing to the United States when it was first being formed as a country were fleeing from religious persecution, and the idea of the separation of church and state being in law was a huge part of the founding of America, because the founders wanted America to be a place where you had the right to practice whatever religion you wanted to or believed in, and that the law was not going to impose any other religious belief on you, because so many other countries and so many other immigrants who were fleeing to America to found this new country and new government, new democracy, came from all different religious backgrounds and had experienced that persecution in one way or another most of the time.
And let's be clear, the religious backgrounds they came from were Christian. Like, it was different types of Christians. We weren't talking about like
the specific founders. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, so all of this is rooted on different type of Christianity, right? Not like, oh, one of them, like some of them were Muslim, some of them were Christian, some of them were Jewish. Like, it's not like that at all. So the problem comes in when Christians believe they're the only ones who can feel rejected, when in fact they're the majority in the country.
I will just remind everyone, I'm sure everyone that is listening to this podcast is very fully aware of this, but like Judaism is actually the most frequently persecuted religion in history. Literally, like 99% of our holidays are about the Jews enduring and escaping religious persecution in one form
Mm-hmm.
or another throughout all of history for the last like thousands of years. Um, and so, and it wasn't always just Christians that persecuted Judaism and Jews throughout history. So, um, it's just so and like that's all even leading up to before I like the actual event that I'm going to specifically talk about in my politic. Like that's not even counting that event. So just want to lay it out there. Just want to put it like on the record. Um that's why I had such an extreme reaction to the text that you were describing earlier on. It's not. So anyway, um, back to your politic, I think it was perfect. Honestly, when I was going through and reading the chapter, I mentioned to you before we started recording, but there were like a million different things that I thought worked for this chapter. In terms of like what politic or what topic to discuss for this one specifically. And one of them that I kind of thought about was metaphor, um, because obviously this chapter is very filled with obvious metaphors of different types of persecution. I thought metaphor because I couldn't think of the word persecution. Like I couldn't think of one word that succinctly described what the metaphor was for, and you succinctly did, and I think that was perfect choice for a politic for this chapter. So thank you. um, we didn't even get into, in terms of persecution, we didn't even really get into um, Lupin being persecuted for his AIDS metaphor. So that was one of the metaphors that I was thinking of when I was
Mm-hmm.
reading this
Mm-hmm.
chapter, was that they really dig into the metaphor of what is it called? Like lycanthropy, that's the word, right? Yeah, lycanthropy being a metaphor for AIDS and the persecution that Lupin endured because of that, and also the fear that he feels as a father um, for passing this on to his kid, and what that means not only health wise, but
Mm-hmm.
also stigmatism, not stigmatism, like stigmas and like persecutions, social persecution that his child will have to face,
Correct.
along with potential health complications. Because just like lycanthropy, or just like, well, I guess just like AIDS, although I think we have a lot. AIDS, back when this book was written, there was not a lot of knowledge or um, research surrounding like the effect of having children. I think when you have the disease, I think that we know a lot more now than we did then. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Well, and to be fair, I don't think that metaphor was thoroughly researched when this book was being
Sure.
written. If we know
Yeah,
enough about the person writing the book.
that's possible too. Yes. Very sure. Very, very, very true. Um, but I think either way, it was
Was trying
very
to
obvious.
find a
Yeah.
way to say it
Either way,
nicely.
I think either way, it was very obvious. I think the point she was trying to make, whether or not it was thoroughly researched, she was definitely trying to make a point that I think can be universally recognized, even if it's not 100% like factually correct.
Or accurate, correct.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yes,
Um,
I think it is more indicative of the headspace of the person
yes.
writing it. Anyway,
Yes. But
continue.
speaking of very direct, obvious metaphors, I decided to go with a specific one for my politic. My politic is the Holocaust, which I don't think I have to define for people, because if you attended any sort of education, most likely, at least I know in the United States, but most likely also in many other, if not all other countries, you probably learned about the Holocaust in your history classes, or social studies classes. Um, but it was the state-sponsored persecution and genocide of 6 million Jews and other various minority groups, um, including disabled people, Black people, um, people of other religions, such as, well, I don't know if the term gypsy is really what we should be using.
Roma.
Roma, right? I was like, I cannot remember the term, but a variety of minority groups were also included in this. But most people know about it in relation to the Jewish population that was affected by this. So the reason that I chose the Holocaust, before I get into that, I just want to preface with my father, who was a rabbi for 35 years. He's now retired. Spent his life, other than doing his rabbinical duties, teaching the Holocaust and devoting lots of time and energy and study to the Holocaust and everything that surrounds it and everything that has to do with it, both to Jews and to not Jews. He taught Holocaust classes to like the local university, and just he made it basically his life's work to kind of learn as much as he possibly could and to educate as much as he possibly could about it. So I have, just like kind of like osmosis through him, I have like a very good idea of of like specific details of the Holocaust. Also, I've like obviously visited many Holocaust museums. I visited the Holocaust Museum in Israel when I visited, which is honestly one of the most moving experiences of my entire life. I will never forget it. If you ever are in Israel and have a chance to go to the Holocaust Museum while you are there, it is a life-changing experience. So other than just being a Jew, which obviously has a lot to do with it, this is just kind of like giving context as to where I'm coming from when we get into this discussion. So the Holocaust in this chapter, the reason I chose it for this chapter, I'll read the quote I chose is kind of long for this, but we'll kind of dig into it when I read the quote. But the gist of it is the Muggle-born persecution and the specifics that are laid out in terms of how they are persecuted and the things that are specifically happening at the ministry and at Hogwarts, in terms of how they're being treated and rounded up and registered and all of that. All of those things are, I'm 99.9% sure, direct like metaphors of exactly what happened during the Holocaust. And I'm pretty sure the author probably took those word for word and made it a metaphor in the book. So that is what I have to say so far. And then I'll get into it when we read our quotes.
Well, and as I teased out earlier, your politic is a very specific subset of my very broad politic.
Yes. When I read the quote, obviously, I'll kind of go through and point out exactly where the similarities are, and we can kind of, if we want to, we can discuss it further. But yeah, it's basically that's what I got. So,
all right, so I'm going to go ahead and go with my quote. I think our quotes are very similar, if not the same one, or mine is a part of yours.
Okay.
And mine starts as follows. The ministry is determined to root out such usurpers of magical power, and to this end has issued an invitation to every so-called Muggle-born to present themselves for an interview by the newly appointed Muggle-born Registration Commission. People won't let this happen, said Ron. It is happening, Ron, said Lupin. Muggle-borns are being rounded up as we speak. But how are they supposed to have stolen magic, said Ron. It's mental. If you could steal magic, there wouldn't be any squibs, would there? I know, said Lupin. Nevertheless, unless you can prove that you have at least one close wizarding relative, you are now deemed to have obtained your magical power illegally and must suffer the punishment.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a part of my quote for sure.
I imagined, because So listeners, Helene didn't write her a quote this time because probably it's so long.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm not sure which one she's got, but I'm pretty sure it's probably this one. But that was like the one where I had like the biggest affinity to persecution, because it is laying out an actual policy by the government by the wizarding government to persecute and quote unquote punish, which is really just persecute, right? Muggle-borns, because of their hatred for people who are not like them, who weren't born like them. And in this instance, the oppressors are acting like they're the victims here too. Like they're like, no, we're persecuting because they're persecuting us. Don't you see? Like this idea, kind of like the same idea of like when Christians say like we're persecuted and that's why we are pushing down our religion on everyone's throats, right? Like down everyone's throats.
Or
it's totally normal. Like we're the victims here.
Or Nazi Germany.
We're toast the victims here, you know?
Yes.
We're just defending our rights as wizards because these Muggle-borns stole our magic. Duh. Like, they are turning the script, switching the script, flipping the script. And like I alluded to earlier, like this is a tactic that has been used during the Bush administration, and then when Obama got elected, because of course they didn't want a black liberal, like not even Obama's not even liberal, he's like a
moderate.
centrist, okay?
Yeah, he's moderate.
Like a black moderate man, like leading the nation, right? And then they just got really mad over it. And now it's just Dark Brandon is ruining us all, blah, 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 blah. Which, they probably also hate him because he's a Catholic, us Catholics, even me, a cultural Catholic, we're not the same as Christians. So, I'm persecuting them for just existing and not being white. Just as you are persecuting them for just existing and daring to take up space, Helene, right? So that's my spiel. Like, I'm sorry, I get really heated.
No, I feel ya. I mean, so before I dig, because I want to dig into your quote first before I read the rest of it.
Let's do it.
Before I do, I'm just curious, like, do you see the direct metaphors from, like, do you see the connections to the Holocaust in this quote?
Like the registration part of it, for sure. I see like the direct correlation to the Holocaust. I see the like questioning of bloodlines as well as like an integral part of that. Let me look back at my quote, because those are the big and like the whole like people won't let this happen, and then of course it happens, like that, like I won't say apathy, but you know what I mean, like that kind of fatigue, I think. Like people are like, well, I guess this is happening, I'm just gonna like mind my own business.
So
the stealing part, like the idea that they're taking something away from you just by existing, kind of thing.
So definitely the registration for sure is a big one. Jews were required to register by Nazi Germany. That was kind of like one of the first policies that the Nazis enacted once Hitler took over Germany. And that's kind of where we get the Jewish stars that they had to wear on their clothing to live as Jews, which this didn't last long in Germany. Obviously, they didn't get to just live as Jews in Germany after registering for very long. They were eventually the word that is used is rounded up. The phrase that is used is rounded up, which they specifically use in this chapter. Muggle-borns are being rounded up as we speak. That is a very common phrase when talking about the Jews being transported to concentration camps where they would then either be worked to death or killed in gas chambers. Um,
Chambers.
obviously, the registration, they had to let the Nazi Germany government know that they are specifically like Jewish, and then they would receive their Star of David. They would have to wear it on their clothing to let the entire rest of the world know that they were Jewish, and kind of like as an outward sign for people, kind of like a okay for other people to like treat them badly.
Like
Honestly,
is it like an
um,
ID of like
yes,
I am not like you. I am other.
yeah, like people could refuse service to Jews, and like shops and restaurants and things like that, and they would know if the person was Jewish because of their thing. Um, so that is obviously a big one. And then obviously to round it up, the people won't let this happen. Oh, it's happening. You mentioned that it's the bystander effect. Like my dad preaches this all the time. Of like, if if you thought that you would have done something differently in early Nazi Germany, like whatever you're doing now, like especially like around the Trump election, like 2016 election,
Yeah.
all of that stuff, whatever you did during that time is what you would have done during Nazi Germany, basically. If you kind of sat back and said, this will work itself out. There are enough other people in the world that care enough to do something about this. I'm one small person. I can't make a change. I like this like isn't a big deal. This doesn't directly affect me.
Mm-hmm.
It won't affect the people that I love, all that stuff. Like if you had any of those thoughts going through your mind, that's exactly how people that's how the Holocaust happened. That's how people let the Holocaust happen. Because too many people thought that way, and too many people sat back and just let it happen because of all the excuses that I kind of listed off earlier. So that is obviously Ron is sitting here like, oh, people aren't going to let this happen. He's wrong. People are and will let that happen.
Yeah.
So that's big one. And then the thought of the persecutor making themselves a victim, the easiest way to get a large society or a large group of people against one specific minority group is to demonize them, right? Is to make them the bad guy. Otherwise, people are going to be like, well, why should we persecute these people, right? Like they're not doing anything. They are members of our society. They're contributing members of our society. They're people. They're humans, right? But what the Nazis did is they made Jews out to be like these evil people who are stealing your money, and like how did they get so much money, right? Jews are rich. They must be stealing from you. They must be, there's like that's how a lot
Yeah.
of these stereotypes came up. And that's kind of what they're doing here with Muggle-borns, right? Muggle-borns are stealing our magic. There's no other way that they could be magic without stealing. So they stole it.
Yep.
Just like the Jews are stealing our money. So
Well, and I imagine like a persuasive argument that they may come up with, right? Like I know this is not canonical, right? But if
right.
we're extending the metaphor, is to say like, didn't you haven't you met a lot of Muggle-borns who are way better at magic than you are? Of course, they've been stealing your magic. Like a
Yeah.
Hermione. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So taking an insecurity and getting turning that fire, lighting that fire up under
Yeah.
them and making that insecurity blossom into this hatred of something that you may not understand or whatever, and say like, oh yeah, it's not that it's my fault, it's that person's fault.
Yeah, and that's like what Hitler was masterful at, right? Like that's the only reason that the Holocaust was able to happen. Not the only reason, but a huge reason as to why Hitler was able to gain power, keep power, and make the Holocaust happen, and convince all these people to literally like mass murder millions of people,
Yeah.
by inciting fear and uncertainty and rage like all targeted at this one group of people. Well,
Yeah.
mainly the one group, but like I said, there are lots of other minority groups as well that were persecuted as well. Um, and then at the end of your quote, the nevertheless, unless you can prove that you have at least one close wizarding relative. Um, so basically, like they have to prove that they have the wizarding relative, so that they can prove that they didn't steal the magic in order to escape persecution or to be safe, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
this is somewhat a little bit different in terms of the Holocaust, because like even if you had like a German relative, like even if you had non-Jewish relatives, if you were Jewish, it didn't matter. Um, like that wasn't exactly how it worked in terms of like the metaphor, but
But
yes. So a way that a lot of people, at least at the beginning, when all this registration stuff was going on, and like the first like wave of Jews were being starting to be sent to these camps, a lot of ways that people avoided that first like wave of it, and even sometimes even further, but most people didn't last much longer after the first wave when they did this, is that they would pay people or find people to change their paperwork, to forge paperwork for them. Um,
yeah, so I think the way that it works in the metaphor, right,
yeah,
is backwards, right? Like if you were as a person, you were questioned about your family tree, and if they found like one drop, like kind of thing, then you were deemed to be a Jew, right? Um, so in the wizarding world, and that would make you persecuted, but in the wizarding world, if you had like a close relative with magic, that would deem you a wizard, right?
yeah.
Like
Like
it's
if you
like
had
the opposite.
one drop of actual magic in your blood, then you would
Correct.
not.
So then that would like free you from the persecution,
Yeah.
but it's still a metaphor of, in both instances, your ancestry is being examined.
Yes. So for example, every single year we have this uh, holiday. I don't know if is really the right word, but we have this like remembrance every
Mm-hmm.
year called Yom HaShoah, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's like a global, like yearly thing where we have like a service where we like recount stories and everything. And in our temple every year, we would get a guest speaker every single year at Yom HaShoah, a new person every year who is a survivor of the Holocaust, to come and tell their story. So my entire childhood, every single year, I'd hear from a different survivor about how they might have, gotten through the Holocaust, or how, maybe their family members weren't so lucky, or all of that. And this last year, I went, this last year, because my dad was receiving an award, I drove home specifically for Yom HaShoah, and the Holocaust survivor that spoke at that ceremony, um, one of the main ways that she was able to get away from that persecution was her family was extremely privileged and extremely wealthy, and was able to spend a large amount of cash and large amount of money to get someone to forge their paperwork, and
Wow.
was able to fool the German government, at least at the beginning, to believe that they were not Jewish. When that failed, um, her family got rounded up and was like in a line to get on a train to be taken to um, a concentration camp. And the only way that they were able to escape from that was that they like were close family friends with one of the Nazis,
Oh wow.
who was doing the like actual like putting on the train, and he was able to save them and get them not on the train. So really, um, obviously the second half of that story isn't relevant relative to the quote, but um, paperwork and like being able to prove whether or not you are or are not this thing to save you from that persecution is also very similar. So
Yeah. Yeah.
That was just from your quote, the similarities.
Continue on with the quote, please.
So your quote was the first half of my quote. I mean, there are parts that like when Hermione is reading from the newspaper. I'm trying to remember, where does the ministry is determined to. Okay, yeah. So you included like the last paragraph of that, but like the first part here, Hermione says, "Muggle-born register," she read aloud. "The Ministry of Magic is undertaking a survey of so-called Muggle-borns, the better to understand how they came to possess magical secrets. Recent research undertaken by the Department of Mysteries reveals that magic can only be passed from one person to person when wizards reproduce, when no wizarding ancestry exists. Therefore, the so-called Muggle-born is likely to have tamed magical power by theft or force." So, I mean, that's obviously just another way of showing how they're demonizing the minority group too.
And they're also using like bogus research, right? Like
Right.
clearly
Yeah.
this didn't happen. Clearly the Department of Mysteries did not discover this, quote unquote. This is what, we would have called in 2016 fake news, right? Like that's using the machinery of the government to propagate misinformation, to aid the, aid in persecution and aid in what these political actors want done.
Right. And so then I'm going to continue on from where your quote ended. So right after your quote, it says, "Ron glanced at Hermione and then said, 'What if purebloods and half-bloods swear a Muggle-born's part of their family? I'll tell everyone Hermione's my cousin.' Hermione covered Ron's hand with hers and squeezed it. 'Thank you, Ron, but I couldn't let you.' 'You won't have a choice,' said Ron, fiercely gripping her hand back. 'I'll teach you my family tree so you can answer questions on it.' Hermione gave a shaky laugh. 'Ron, as we're on the run with Harry Potter, the most wanted person in the country, I don't think it matters. If I was going back to school, it would be different. What's Voldemort planning for Hogwarts?' she asked Lupin." Okay, there's more, but before I get to that, just that part, I think the most obvious connection is Anne Frank.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're looking at, so basically that entire section talks about, like, it illustrates how people who aren't being persecuted, so in the case of the Holocaust, Germans and people who could pass for like Aryan race, and people who are not Jewish, there were people who obviously wanted to protect their friends, and people who they had grown close to, and Ron here is obviously searching for a way to legally protect Hermione in any way possible. Well, protect Hermione in any way possible under the policies of the law by illegal means, I guess is what I'm trying to say. What
Mm-hmm.
he'd be doing was illegal, but like to try and do it above the board as much as possible. But obviously it wasn't really like, you couldn't just, an Aryan person couldn't just like go to a Nazi and be like, this Jewish person shouldn't be persecuted because even though they're Jewish, they're my cousin. Like, that doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah, that wouldn't work.
It doesn't
So,
matter.
yeah.
But so instead they would hide them, or give them places, like give them safe spaces, give them refuge, like we kind of talked about in one of the more recent chapters. So obviously, Anne Frank and her family were hidden by a German family in their, like, what's the word for it? The place behind their bookcase. It was like a little hideout, like secret room that no one knew existed. So there is that. And then we're going to get into Hogwarts. So this was interesting. "Attendance is now compulsory for every young witch and wizard," he replied. "That was announced yesterday. It's a change because it was never obligatory before. Of course, nearly every witch and wizard in Britain had been educated at Hogwarts, but their parents had the right to teach them at home or send them abroad if they preferred. This way, Voldemort will have the whole wizarding world population under his eye from a young age. And it's also a way of weeding out Muggle-borns because students must be given blood status, meaning that they have proven to the Ministry that they are of wizard descent before they are allowed to attend." Does this remind you of anything?
Well, All right, so going to Hogwarts is now compulsory, and it's a way to, like, one, weed out the Muggle-borns from ever acquiring knowledge of magic, right? But also to shape minds of wizards, young witches and wizards, into this new regime, right?
Yes. And like it mentions in the quote, in order to attend Hogwarts, they have now instituted this gate, right? Where in order to actually go, you have to prove your blood status. So like they literally will not allow anybody with less than like half blood, like into Hogwarts to get an education. Um, so
Well, which means that these like young witches and wizards, right, who are Muggle-born, will like not be able to fully harness their magical ability because they will never learn to control it.
Well, yeah, so it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? So they're not only requiring certain blood status to get in to wizarding school, but they are saying that it is compulsory to go to wizarding school. So if it is compulsory to go, if it is required that you have to go to Hogwarts, but you literally cannot go to Hogwarts unless you or like if you are
Prove your blood
yeah,
status.
if you're a Muggle-born, you literally cannot go. It's basically an effective way to completely shut the Muggle-borns out from any sort of magical education. They have no other options, and therefore they
And
can.
would they like question in jail a an 11-year-old or a 10-year-old who cannot explain
I want to get to
how they got their magic?
Yeah, I want to get to that in a second too because I had questions about that. But before we get to that specifically, um, basically the similarities that here are there are many stories I've heard personally, at least from survivors, about how basically they they like schools kind of were given the opportunity to just refuse to educate Jews. Um,
Okay.
so at the beginning, they would still go to school, but even the teachers were kind of like advised to like not include Jews in activities and not um, basically to make them feel othered, which is a big part um, of like the social isolation and the social persecution before you get to the actual political like policy persecution. But that was just the beginning, and then eventually Jews were not allowed to attend German schools at a certain point. So there were lots of young Jews in Nazi Germany, or even just Europe in general. Denmark, Holland, all those other like areas that were going through the similar um, persecution. That like these children, and I've spoken to many survivors that just were not allowed to have an education until they were able to make it to the United States. Like they did not start their education until they were like 14, 15, 16 years old and able to go to the United States. So that is a big part of like the restriction to access of education. Obviously in the wizarding world, it's a specific type of education. Like they just can't learn to utilize the magic that they quote unquote stole or whatever. But using the education setting to kind of start to plant those seeds of doubt and otherness at a young age, and like you said, also Voldemort using it as a tool to shape the minds um, of the wizarding youth however he wants. And that specifically reminds me of the Hitler Youth, which was an organization that Hitler used to, mold young boys into Nazis as soon as possible. Um, and, get them to believe and act under his regime and cause. So that is the gist of it. In terms of what you just said, and of like would they question in jail an 11-year-old or whatever. My question, because I don't think they specifically say in this chapter or even the book in general, do you we don't know what the punishment is that they talk about. Other like they do they specifically say, other than like getting like your wand taken away and like being basically shunned from the wizarding world, what happens to a Muggle-born when they are registered and proven to not have any magical blood in their family?
I mean, I just wouldn't put it past them to like jail them.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing Azkaban would make sense, but like the thing is, I don't think they ever straight out say, right?
No, no, there's no canonical evidence to what the punishment would be. We only see that one scene where like Ron is pretending to be that man's
Yeah,
wife,
yeah,
husband, and she's about to get her wand taken away, right?
yeah.
Um, but I fear that is just
Just
step one.
yeah, just the beginning.
That's like the Star of David. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, and then they will get to what Hitler called the final solution.
Correct.
There were stages of the Holocaust, and the final solution was the implementation of the actual genocide, the concentration camps with the gas chambers, and like the
Correct.
systematic killing, not even just the work camps where they would work them and starve them until they physically like gave out, but like you know literally rounding up young
So
women and children into gas chambers and killing them. Yeah,
so here's another, I think, like plot hole as well, is that wouldn't technically, if you suppressed a Muggle-born witch or wizard's magic, create an obscurial within them?
probably.
So you're creating like you're doing genocide, really, because that the obscurial is going to kill the witch or wizard,
Yeah,
but it's
most.
also going to
Yeah,
create um a liability for
yeah,
those around them.
yeah. Most
So
Obscurials die before the age of like 11. So
that is also like,
yeah,
ugh.
yeah. So I mean, I personally be really interested to hear like her thoughts, what the author's thoughts were in terms of like where she would have seen the ministry have like go with, as like in terms of this registration. Would she have taken the metaphor all the way and had them commit genocide and murder innocent Muggle-borns, because you know that's probably what Voldemort would have wanted, um
Mhm.
or did she leave it out because she didn't want it to seem like that extreme? I'm just really interested to see, because obviously I don't think that the persecution or the punishment, which literally I think that's the only word they use to describe this
Yes,
in this chapter,
correct.
is punishment. I don't imagine the punishment to be something as simple as you don't get to go to Hogwarts or have a wand. Like I
Yeah, no, I think that's just phase one.
Yeah.
Like they are literally just coming up with this a few days or a week or whatever
Mhm.
after the ministry has fallen. So of course it's not going to be all of a sudden.
Right. And like they're starting, obviously in this chapter we see they're starting to sow those seeds of, well, we can't let them be part of our community because they're not actually wizards. But not only are they not actually wizards, but they're stealing our magic. And then they're going to start building on that and building on that and play on that villain angle of, they're stealing our magic, they're taking what makes us unique, they're making it their own, they're trying to make the entire world magical with their illegal means or whatever, and then they use that as an excuse for the more harsh punishment that they eventually will
Correct.
roll out.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, obviously I talked for quite a bit on that, but I had a lot to say. So that is
Well,
the
I think this has been a pretty great, like, in-depth discussion of terrible things,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But that are they're important to talk about, right? Because history does not repeat itself, but it rhymes, is the saying.
Yeah.
So we won't see the same thing done in the same ways, but we will see echoes of that, right? And I think that it's still happening.
And
It's just that the technologies are different now.
and right now we're starting to see persecution on the lesser levels of women in our society today. We're starting to see women be persecuted for making decisions with their bodies that people in charge of the law do not necessarily agree with. And right now, it's just it's just restricting those and trying to control that. But soon that will quickly turn to punishing women for making decisions that they either are making now or have made in the past. I think we're even starting to see that more recently with certain policies that have like started to come up. Like there are policies and laws that are being introduced that start to villainize and criminalize what is it called?
IVF.
IVF. Yeah, I'm like, what's the freaking IVF? Because like these laws are starting to recognize that as um like murder in some cases, um, especially like unsuccessful IVF, um, and things like that. So just people who are, identify as female or woman, just keep your eyes. Actually, everyone, men too. Everyone, keep your eyes on those things because this is where it starts. It starts small and then it starts to grow and grow until we don't know how we got there.
Helene, I think that we're to the point where we talk about how we see the politics in of this chapter in the series, and I think there's echoes and direct metaphors to the politics of the Holocaust in the entire series. I mean, it's all about like the idea of blood purity. I mean, come on.
Yeah, Wizard Hitler.
That's
Like people always talk about Voldemort as Wizard Hitler and Death Eaters as
yeah.
Nazis. That's like a common thing in fandom.
Yeah, but like blood purity and like the idea of like a perfect wizard or whatever, like the perfect race. That's, basically the Holocaust. So that's how I see your politic in the series.
Yeah, and your politic, I mean, thankfully it's a little bit easier because like I think persecution is pretty broad and we see the persecution of lots of people and beings and creatures in this series, but most recently comes to mind is house elves.
Yeah.
We recently talked about how Creature was persecuted for specifically being a house elf by Voldemort in a recent chapter. But yeah, I mean, Hagrid for being a half blood or half giant, half wizard. All these, it's just a very prevalent theme as well.
That being said, it's just time to talk about what we hated and what we liked in this chapter, which is our Dementor and chocolate. Helene, what was your Dementor this chapter?
Obviously, I didn't like the Holocaust stuff, but I'm gonna say something.
Not a big fan of this.
Yeah, no, the whole thing was kind of upsetting. But the Dementor I specifically chose for the chapter was actually the interaction with Lupin, in terms of him wanting to leave his child and Tonks to go join the trio on their quest, but not only Lupin's choice to like pursue that, but honestly the way that Harry handled it too. Because while I do believe that like Harry was in the right for like not letting him come along and like telling it like it is, I do believe that he could and probably should have handled the situation with a bit more empathy and compassion. Like Lupin is this person that has been there for him all the whole time he's known him, has supported him, has acted like a very supportive father figure, kind of like the most underrated father figure for Harry. And Harry just kind of like fucking shits in his face, really, is the easiest way to say it. He is savage and really harsh to Lupin. I just think
Well,
that
we have similar.
yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have similar dementors. Mine isn't Harry's reaction as much because to me, like Harry's still 17 years old and he has a fuck ton of responsibility and
he has other things to worry about.
not enough fucks to give, to be honest. But my dementor is Lupin and his like cowardly, selfish decision of being like, I'm just gonna like not tell the trio that my wife is pregnant until they basically wring it out of me. And before then, I was just making like a very like impassioned speech about like how I could protect them, and also then say that he regretted marrying Tonks every single day after it happened. It could not be my husband. Could not be my husband. I would have murdered him.
This is like the one part of the series where like it's hard for me to say that Lupin is one of my favorite characters because of this part. Like I love Lupin so much. I love him and I think
Same.
he's great, but I cannot say he's my favorite character because this part really really ruined, like it's like uncharacteristic of him. I think it was like character what's the word? Character God, there's the word for it.
Development?
No, like assassination.
Suicide?
Character assassination. I'm like, what's the freaking term? I know this. No, I feel like this was just so out of character for him that I don't think that Lupin really would have done this, but he does. So but
it's just saying it's the both. To me, it's both. It's the saying of it's the reluctant spreading of the news, right? Like you know, I guess she's pregnant. And saying like she's having a baby, like that verbiage of not we are having a baby, right? She is having a baby. Excuse me, what? You were not part of this situation, sir?
Yeah. I get that he's scared, but like, yeah.
Well, you know what? It's like, as we know now, it is more life-threatening to the woman than the man. So, get your act together, sir.
Yeah.
And just, again, could not be me. I could not be that wife because I would murder him.
Yeah. I try to have empathy for him because I understand that it must be like unimaginably hard to be going through what he's going through in terms of like his condition and like the persecution that he faces for that and what he's worried his child is going to face. But I still think that there is a way that he could and really should have handled it in terms of what we know about him as a character, and he did not live up to that.
Also, to say out loud to a room of 17-year-olds, I just got married as a 30-something-year-old, I want to say a 37, 38-year-old, for the first time in my life, to someone who clearly adores me, and I have regretted it every single day since.
Yeah, and
I want to slap him.
It's so confusing, too, because, like, he doesn't outright say that it's not because he doesn't love her. I think that it's like subtext that he regrets it because because of what it's doing to her and not because he doesn't have those feelings for her, but he never says it.
He never says it, and that's like not cool, man. Like no.
Yeah, so like the way that it's worded in the chapter makes it sound like he like does not care for her.
Care for her. Yeah. So like, and once again, I am imploring wizards to go find therapy. Once again.
Yes. That's a good plan for them. But we should talk about something that makes us happy because I'm sick of being sad. This episode was so heavy.
All right, let's talk about the chocolate. Do you have a chocolate recommendation for our listeners this week?
Oh my God, I was just thinking about this the other day. Do I? I don't think I do. I did finally get those Rice Krispie treats that I was talking about last time. I did finally find them in chocolate, like made with Cocoa Krispies.
Ooh,
So like they're Rice Krispie treats made
yes.
with Cocoa Krispies, and I bought them, and they are just as delicious, if not more. So I mean, I guess that can be my chocolate recommendation.
That is a fantastic chocolate. My chocolate is the chocolate cupcakes from Hostess. You know, the ones that have like the white squealy at the top.
Yeah, those are good.
They're filled with white cream. A plus plus. It's an oldie but a goodie.
And one of my favorites from Hostess are the zingers. Have you ever had a zinger?
Oh yes, fantastic.
Those are like, for some reason, the frosting on those just tastes a little bit less like artificial than the frosting on, like, the cupcakes are amazing, but the like chocolate frosting is always a little like hard. And
Yep.
I don't know, the zingers
See,
taste
but
more
that's
like
what
cake.
I like about the frosting. Because, like, okay, so like I like those because the frosting in the middle is so like marshmallowy and frothy, but
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
have the contrast with like the hardened icing at the top.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I get it. The mixture of textures.
I love it so much. Anyway, let's go into the chapter chocolates now. What was your chocolate, Helene?
Surprisingly, it's Ron again.
Look at you. Look at my little baby Helene growing up.
I know. I was like, okay, Ron, I see you. This time it's Ron immediately offering to tell the ministry that Hermione is his cousin, and then offering to teach her his entire family tree so that she wouldn't be persecuted as a Muggle-born without a close magical family member and have to endure those punishments that go with it. Um, I mean, Ron like offering to break the law to keep Hermione safe, which I'm not surprised
What a
by,
classic
but
romantic you are.
yeah. Honestly, like, it would have been my chocolate no matter who did it. Like, if Harry had offered to do it or whatever. Not that it would have helped if Harry offered to do it, because Harry is more persecuted than Hermione at this point. But, uh, but it was just like, I guess it's really just the fact that like he did not miss a beat. He was like, he didn't even have to think about it for a second, like what the ramifications would be if they found out that he was lying, like the ramifications not only on him but on his family. If they found out he was lying, he doesn't care. He was immediately like, I will do what is necessary to save her, which is just very sweet. What about you?
Super great. Mine was. I'm sorry, I'm laughing and I haven't even said what mine was. Mine was Creature's whole like one more for luck, which just made me laugh out loud so much.
Yeah, when he was hitting Mundungus over the head with the pan. Yeah.
I mean, not that I condone violence, unless it's a Mundungus.
Yeah, I mean, Mundungus is pretty awful, so I can understand that.
And it's just like the idea of like, because Harry's like, no, stop, Creature. And he's like, one more for luck. Just like, it's like a playful side of Creature, you know, that.
Yeah, we don't get to see that very often.
Yeah, depth to him. And I was like, chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Brilliant, no notes.
Yeah, it was really cute.
Well, last week we asked our listeners the following question. What do you think was the impetus for Regulus's change in loyalty? And did we get some answers, Helene?
I'm thinking maybe we need to give the listeners more time or something to answer, because I give about 24 hours before we record, because like, we usually get the majority of the answers pretty early on, but these last two times we like the answers start coming in later after we record. So hopefully that's the case this time. But we did get one amazing answer from the ever reliable, ever amazing Dream Quaffle, who is our listener, Jeff.
Okay.
And I'll read his, and then we can kind of discuss what we think too, if we want to get into that. But
of course. Well, and I mean, not to get too inside baseball on this podcast about our podcast, but we could probably also give the listeners a little bit more time and just post it ahead of release schedule.
That's possible too. Yeah, we could do that. And then just like remind people to answer it. Anyway, everybody who does send us answers, like, we so greatly appreciate it every single time. We always love hearing what you have to say. So never stop, honestly. But in terms of this question, Dreamcoffle said, everybody has their limit. Sometimes it can even be something that you think you can handle, but when it hits different, but then it hits different when you have to face it. For Regulus, I think he witnessed something that was harder to see than he thought it would be, like the murder of a child or the kind of dark magic that does something to a person beyond just causing horrible pain, like someone got turned inside out or something.
I think that's quite fair. I think it's that idea of, for me, it probably must have been like something like, at least all I can know is from like my experience, right? Like when I choose to change a job, right? Like it's never the one thing that made the decision. I mean, he's signing up for a type of job in a way, right? Like he thought he knew what he was getting into, but for me, it's all those little things like get together and bit by bit, and like there's this one like last drop of something that makes me go, fuck it, I'm out, or I need to find a new job or whatever. And it's never really that one last thing was the reason why I left. It's all those things that came together. Like honestly, that one last thing could have been that someone scoffed and I could have been like, you know what, that's it. I'm out, bitch. Like I'm done. You know?
Yeah.
And if you say that out loud, you're like, it's just a scoff, like someone was having a bad day or whatever. It's like, no, it's not the scoff. It's just everything that happened before, right?
Yeah.
Like even let's say you're ending a relationship. You're never ending a relationship, I hope, right? Based on like one red flag.
Yeah.
Like, or something that looks like a red flag. Like, honestly, if someone has a real red flag, end it. On it. Like, it's fine. But if it's a normal relationship that you really were excited about, or even friendship, right? And you're like ending it over like one thing, it's never that one thing, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it could be a couple of different things. Like I do think this is definitely a possibility, like that he saw something that he just like didn't expect to have to deal with or whatever. There for me it's kind of like three possibilities really. One being that most of the time people in these types of situations, I feel like in order to like finally want to change or like get out of it, something has to happen directly to them or to someone that they care about. Like it has to directly affect them. So like I don't
like
know
Creature.
Right. So like I don't know if seeing Voldemort murder a child really would have done it unless it was like he was expecting a child and saw his child in this one that Voldemort killed and was therefore worried that Voldemort would murder his own child.
Or that child reminded him of someone he used to know, or a family member, or
So like in this scenario, like realistically, I think that either he saw injustices being portrayed against someone that he cared about. So like Snape with Lily, like he was all buying into the Death Eater thing, but then he cared for a mudblood, right? So then he saw that like maybe this isn't the right path for me or whatever because someone he cared about was being persecuted. So that's kind of one possibility for me. The other one would be that he joined the Death Eaters specifically. Like he was probably more like serious in the fact that he didn't really fully believe in the cause, but he joined it because his whole like goal in life was to make his parents proud, and he wanted to do what he thought his parents wanted him to do. And then eventually he got so deep in it that he was like, my parents' approval is not worth this, and therefore he was like, I will risk the approval of my parents, which I've been seeking my whole life, to do something that's good and right because it's worth doing this. That's also a possibility, which I think is very plausible. And then the third one, which is probably the least possible, is that he never believed in the cause. He was always like serious, but he got in so that he could make a difference from the inside. And he got to a point where he felt like he could access these Horcruxes, because like no one is going to have the access like that he would have, right? No one from the outside. So maybe he saw that and was like, the only way to really make a difference and stop Voldemort is to do it from the inside.
I feel like it might be at first number 1 and then number 3. Like, and I'm going to continue doing this on the inside even though I don't believe it anymore because I can make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it definitely could be a combination of them too.
Yeah. So yeah, it's
those are my theories.
I love it. Thank you for your theories. All right, so for this episode, we are wondering the following. If you, dear listener, were Harry, how would you have reacted to Lupin's offer to protect the trio in exchange for leaving his family? Hot takes here.
Yeah.
Only hot takes. Speaking of hot takes, let's go to media we've been consuming. Helene, when you are seeking refuge from the terrible metaphors, and by terrible, I mean not badly executed, but like metaphors to terrible things.
Yes.
What have you been doing?
I don't think I've talked about this yet on the podcast, but I'm really enjoying She-Hulk. I don't know. Are you watching that?
I love it so much.
Yeah. I think it's great. It's what I really love is that Marvel is like doing stuff that's different than what they've ever, like they're trying new things. Like I love that Marvel isn't just one thing, right? Like for DC, I think a lot of it is like most of the DC universe is just like one thing, right? It's serious, it's dark, it's gritty, it's like not a lot of fun. It's pretty monotone, you know. And I'm saying this as like I literally like my job is working on DC stuff for a living. So there are bright spots for sure. Like some of their shows are definitely like break the mold, but with Marvel, I feel like everything that they do recently is like a complete difference from the norm.
I love when she breaks the fourth wall so much. I thoroughly enjoy it.
It's so great, right?
I even love like the detail of the story, like of like alternative like storyboarding of things that happened off camera or like after the episode wraps. Like love those.
Yes, the cut scenes for these, like the after credit scenes or whatever, are some of the best in the entire Marvel.
Yeah. Same. The dialogue is fantastic. It is crisp. It is witty. It is funny. It reminds me, I know that I'm going to probably be burnt at the stake for this, but it reminds me of like, what if Fleabag was a Marvel superhero? And also not a douchebag.
Yeah, I still haven't seen Fleabag, but from what I've heard of it, that sounds like an accurate description.
It's all the like breaking of the fourth wall stuff that is very much Fleabag.
Yeah, and something that I kind of noticed recently that I thoroughly enjoy is like I kind of think that I'm not sure that there is like an overarching plot. You know, like there isn't like one of my friends brought up this week when I was talking to her about the episode, like I don't really get what the like plot or goal of this last episode was, like overall, like for the overarching like plot of the series, right? Like there, and I realized like I don't know if there is one thread that's like,
I think there's something brewing in the background that we are going to look back and go, God, you know what I mean?
Whatever the big climax of the season is going to be, we have like I don't think they've introduced it yet, which is fine. But what I was going to say, what I love is that I think that the show is taking more of like a case of the week type format.
And I love that too.
I love it because I honestly miss that with like when shows used to have like 24 episodes per season and not every single episode serviced the overarching plot of the season, because like these days every like all seasons are like 10-13 episodes max, and if the episode if one specific episode doesn't work towards the like overall plot, people think it's like a waste of an episode. Like every single freaking episode has to like have a purpose in terms of like telling the overall story these days. And I mean, like I it's fine, but like I don't like it. Like I miss being able to like watch an episode of TV and just like live in that world for an
Oh,
episode.
you mean the Law and Order format that we
Yeah,
so love?
Law and Order, or like Buffy did that. Like they did Monsters of the Weeks. Like they would have like like an overarching villain that they would be trying to fight the whole season, and then the season finale they would figure out a way to beat the villain. Like they have a big bad is what they would call them. But like not every single episode had to do with figuring out how to defeat the big bad. Like the big bad was not always a plot point in every single episode. Like sometimes you would just have a fun episode where you would just go and do a thing and like expand the world and like character develop a little bit more and like introduce new aspects of this like
Mm-hmm.
world that you're in. And I feel like it enhances the experience a bit more. And with She-Hulk, I just really, really love that like we're just getting like literally we're just seeing her like be a lawyer and be a Hulk and date. Like there's like she's just being who she is. Like we just get to see her doing her shit. Like I love it. I don't know.
Yeah. I love it. All right. I, in addition to She-Hulk, which I have been thoroughly enjoying, watched a little movie on Netflix called Love and the Villa.
Okay.
Have you seen this? The previews or promo for this?
No.
It's very much enemies to lovers, which is one of my favorite tropes. So it starts. I believe it's Cat Graham.
Okay.
Cat
Graham.
And I believe it's Cat Graham. Let me double check.
I know Lauren Graham, but I can't remember who Cat Graham is, so I'm looking it up.
Yes, I am correct. It is Cat Graham.
Oh, she's Bonnie from Vampire Diaries.
It stars Cat Graham and some British bloke, and and that's how I'm going to leave it. And she's a teacher, and she has been fantasizing to this trip, to like Juliet's like the Romeo and Juliet kind of like plaza and balcony and stuff, forever. So in Italy, and I mean, not to like spoil the plot too much, her boyfriend of 4 years dumps her because he's like, this is moving too fast. And she's like, we've been dating for 4 years. What the fuck? Like, I've been planning this vacation for us and saving up. And their Airbnb gets double booked, and this British guy is there. So they start like feuding over it, like trying to get the other one to quit the Airbnb. And magic happens. Anyway, it's fantastic. I love it. I laughed so much. I highly recommend it.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like a mixture of different parts of other like movies that I like.
It's like Lips to Juliet meets like, I don't know, some other enemies to lovers situation. I don't know. It's great. I love it.
Like it. That sounds fun.
It's definitely very Netflix campy, but still honestly pretty good rom-com. Like I'm not gonna dump on it because it takes from other rom-coms. Like that's what literature is.
I love cheesy rom-coms. Just the cheesier the better. I'm excited to watch the first few episodes of season 5 of Handmaid's Tale just came out. So I'm excited to watch that, and also talking about cheesy.
I don't think I'm in that. I'm not in a headspace for that yet. I don't think.
No, I mean,
that's just me.
I'm gonna go into it with no expectations because I honestly thought that the season 4 finale was the end of the series. I thought it was a great ending. I didn't know when I watched the season 4 finale that there was more that they were going to make. I thought that it was over, and I was like, oh, this is a perfect ending for this show. And then when I found out there was going to be season 5, I was like, oh, but why? So we'll see. I don't know how I'm going to like it, but also Love is Blind season 3 comes out in a couple of weeks. So I'm really excited for that too. So
Okay, will you let me know when you start watching it so we can start watching it together and like
yes.
text?
And then I think I saw that they what is it like after the altar is coming, like the season 2 of After the Altar is coming this Friday, I think. So
Oh.
like the season 3 like with the new people is going to be in October, and then like the season 2 recap of the people after who like you know, recapping everybody where people are at or whatever after they got married or didn't get married is going to be this weekend. So
Wow. Okay, okay. I've got a lot to catch up on, plus Dreamlight Valley. Hmm. How
yeah.
am I going to make this happen?
Yeah, I've been it's been hard because I've been watching Golden Girls while I play Dreamlight Valley, like in the background. I've been watching it, and now I finished it, and so I started the Golden Palace as like my placeholder until I find something. Have you heard of the Golden Palace or watched the Golden
Yes.
Palace?
Yeah, I haven't watched The Golden Palace because I heard it's not that great. So I was like, and also if you don't have my girl like Dorothy,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. It really does feel like an extension of the show. Surprisingly, like it doesn't feel like a completely different or new thing. They even use the same theme song, like sung by a different person in a different like style, but it's the same.
Cadence.
Yeah, it's like this, but
Oh.
it's the same song and like the same transition music. So like you know how like like in the girl, yeah, like the background music that like introduces every scene and everything. It's kind of like the Gilmore Girls with their la las. You know what I'm talking
Mhm.
about?
La
Um,
la 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 la.
Yeah, exactly. So it definitely still feels like an extension of the same show. But it does feel weird without Dorothy. And I don't think Rose and Blanche can really hold themselves without Dorothy in general. But
I mean, I did love how the show ended for my girl Dorothy. Like, I feel like that was a perfect
so
ending.
I thought it felt rushed. I was like, I don't believe that she's marrying this guy. Like this doesn't feel like realistic at all. Like
Well, I mean, is it rushed? Of course, because it's an episodic thing where it's like not everything has to be in service to the bigger arc, Helene. But
no, but it would have been nice if she had like been dating this whole guy for the whole last season, or like to like get it, like make an emotional attachment to this man. I don't have any feelings for this man at all.
sometimes, first of all, sometimes when you know, and second of all, he was rich, he was handsome, and those were the two things that people always said that she wouldn't get. So I am here for it.
Yeah, and I think with the Golden Palace, they're really just trying to replace Dorothy with Sophia, which, like, it's fine.
Works to an extent, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
I mean, it's great. I will probably, if you finish it and you're like, it's worth like a background watch, I guess I can watch
I mean,
it.
I'm like a few episodes in already, and I do think it's worth the background watch. Like, I think it's
Okay.
enjoyable enough.
Well, I am highly recommending Love in the Villa because both my mom and I enjoyed it, and we usually don't like the same things. So she didn't fall asleep fully during the movie, which is like the highest compliment she can ever give a movie.
Wow, that's exciting.
I think she mostly just really liked when they were going to war with each other. She was laughing out loud so hard.
Yeah, enemies to lovers is kind of a love-hate trope for me. I tend to like friends to lovers.
Oh, you know what though? I as a person who loves friends to lovers or like fake relationship trope, like love that one. This one didn't seem like utterly malicious like some enemies to lovers are.
Yeah, my problem with enemies to lovers is that I tend to find it a little unrealistic. Because like how
Oh,
often
I
does
mean,
that really happen? But
okay, Helene, we're not here for realism, okay?
no, I like a certain amount of realism in most of my media. I say as
Okay,
I consume mostly fantasy and supernatural stuff.
I'm not here for the realism in the romance genre. I'm here for like the wish fulfillment aspect of it.
I want to be able to
Do
read
I wish
it.
personally? Do I wish personally an enemies to lovers for myself? Not at all. Not at all. But like, do I like to see it in other people? Yes. Yes, I do.
I like to be able to watch something and be like, you know what? This could happen to me. This could realistically
Okay.
happen to me.
Yeah, no, I do not watch it like that. Perhaps I'm just in a I don't know. I'm in a different mindset. And now I'm just like I think that's feasible. Good for them. More than like really this is not realistic. Like I can't view it like that.
That's fair.
But yeah, I think that's it for the show today. Please join us next time as we talk about chapter 12 of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, and this one is titled Magic is Might.
Yeah, I think the metaphor is only going to get stronger as we navigate through these next few chapters.
Super lighthearted, guys. It's gonna be great. We're not gonna have any fodder for conversation. We're just gonna be cracking jokes left and right.
Yeah, we're getting into the territory of this book where we are literally watching the Ministry like slowly transform into Nazi Germany. So like it's just what we have to look forward to.
Just some light fascism. It's fine.
But anyway, if you've enjoyed this conversation, which I mean, I really hope you did, even though it was really, heavy, we would love if you could take a second to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you happen to be listening to us right now. It helps the algorithm and helps people discover the podcast, which we're always hoping to do, even though we're, 11 chapters into the last book. We still want new people to discover the podcast. And, it also just makes us feel good. So please do that.
Please help our ego. Please help our self-esteem. Our therapists will thank you.
Yes, exactly.
But until then, politics managed. Support this show by going to patreon.com/Occhiopolitics. Our patrons keep this show going. You can find us online at Occhiopolitics.com, and we are at Occhiopolitics on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can email us your thoughts at info@Occhiopolitics.com. Leave us a voicemail at 915-996-1699. And you might just hear yourself on the podcast. Adriana Wilson is the founder and creative director of the podcast. Helene Karp is the producer and social media manager. Allison Pullman is the audio wizard and editor who makes us sound so good. Cover art and physical rewards are designed by Adriana Wilson. The views expressed by the hosts and guests are expressly their own and not representative of their employers or associates. Occhiopolitics is part of the MuggleNet family of podcasts.
I think, you dropped your headphone.
I dropped a headphone. Go ahead.